Good morning. President Nelson Mandela said that education is the most powerful tool you can use to change the world. And if I can paraphrase, broadband access is the most powerful tool you can use to make the world a better place and more accessible for all. My name is Clarence Anthony, and I am the CEO of the National League of Cities, and we're happy to be the co-host of this event today to talk about broadband opportunities, boosting uptake in America's cities and metropolitan regions. Brookings is a wonderful partner, and this is an important discussion. The National League of Cities represents 19,000 cities throughout America, towns, villages, and 218 million Americans which live in those cities. Fulfilling our mission of bringing information and access and best practices to leaders all of America that make cities better is our mission. Elevating this issue, broadband, to every citizen and making it accessible to every citizen is one of the major focuses of the National League of Cities. That's why we are pleased to lend our voice and our ears and our minds to this topic. As you know, internet is no longer a luxury. It is a necessity, and it's a tool that helps citizens participate in every sector of the community, the economy, create opportunities for success. When Americans lack access to high-quality internet, the impact is felt at home, it's felt in our cities, it's felt in the students' educational development, which is halted. Older Americans are left behind, and more importantly as well, the business growth and development and economic development of communities is also staggered. We often ask the question, who's responsible? All sectors are responsible, whether you're the federal government, the state, local government, private sector, the health community, the public safety, you name it, and of course the educational institutions throughout America. All of us in this room can recall in 1934 when the Communications Act was developed, and the reason it was created and adopted by the federal government was because they thought and knew that it was so important that every American had the ability, should have the ability, to have the tool of communications and telecommunications. They knew that it would make a difference in the prosperity of America. Broadband is the same perspective, because if we don't get access and provide access to every American, we won't be the nation that we're capable of being. This is a big challenge. Big challenges deserve big solutions and require big solutions. Now, things are happening in the public and private sector. I don't want to leave this opening here today because that's what our panel is going to talk about. What is happening in America? What are those challenges and what are those solutions? We're partnering with companies in the private sector, Comcast, Google, and other companies that are really reaching in communities. Microsoft, creating ideas and opportunities for people to get access again. So we're proud of the progress that is being made locally and nationally, but today is about solutions, and we are committed to that discussion today as the National League of Cities. Before I introduce our next speaker, I want to take a moment to acknowledge Karen. Thank you so much for getting me through the security there. I'm sure all of you. It's for Senator Booker. That's the reason we have this security here. I just want y'all to know that. It wasn't me. I was clarified. And I also want to make sure that Adi, who reached out to us, and I really appreciate this opportunity because Brookings is bringing relevant issues to the forefront. The National League of Cities bringing relevant issues to the forefront. And we're going to continue to do that with partners like Brookings. So thank you so much. My team, Nicole, thank you so much for your help. I'd be honored to ask my president of the National League of Cities to stand up, Councilmember Melanie Colbert-Keene from Joplin, Missouri. And finally, I want to thank all of you and our great panelists and speakers who've agreed to participate in this discussion today. Now, the discussion won't be successful, in my mind, unless we challenge, they don't want me to say this, challenge these panelists and get some real outcomes. You remember I talked about big challenges deserve big solutions? We need that in this room today, or we will not have been able to achieve the goal that we want to achieve. So with that, Adi, do you want to come on up? And is a fellow here at Brookings Metropolitan Policy Program, and he's going to help us move through the remainder of the day. Thank you all so much for this. Let's get to work, and let's really bring access to all of Americans, because we can't leave anyone behind. Thank you all. Good morning.
Good morning, everyone. First and foremost, thank you so much to the National League of Cities for helping us put on this event. In particular, I'm looking around for Nicole. Hi, Nicole. Everyone should meet Nicole Dupuis before they leave. She's an amazing infrastructure lead over at National League of Cities, so thank you so much for helping us. And also, welcome to everyone to the Brookings Institution, also to those streaming online. And thank you in particular to those of you in the room today. This is not a normal security day for us here at the institution. So I really appreciate your patience, and we hope to reward it with an exciting and interesting conversation over these next 90-ish minutes or so. And at least for me, it's really easy to be excited when talking about broadband, because as much as this is a public setting, and now that I realize for posterity it's going to be saved on the internets forever, I have a confession to make. I'm completely and utterly addicted to the internet. I wake up every morning, I check weather and sports scores. I get to work. I read email. I look up other people's research online. I might mix in a New York Times story or some Twitter activity if no one's looking. We get home, and my wife and I, every single night, FaceTime with our family outside of town so they can see our toddler grow up and make sure they see her face and not just hear her voice. I imagine that your story might be a little bit different, but in the end of the day, many of you in this room, and of course streaming online, the internet is a mandatory part of your day. But what's implicit in all of that effectively economic activity is that whether it's the smartphone in your pocket or the cable or fiber line running to your house, is that you have a digital connection to the world everywhere you go, and it moves at rapid speeds. But there's another component that's implicit too. You have the digital skills to be able to use those connected devices, and often you probably have the financial means to afford multiple connections, again, both your smartphone and that connection to your home. Unfortunately, though, today, and as Clarence kind of clarified in his opening remarks, that's not available to every American. My colleague Joe Kane, who's also sitting in the front, he and I released some new research this week looking at census data to better understand how many Americans are subscribing to the internet across the country. And the findings from that research are stark. Only 75% of Americans currently subscribe to a private broadband subscription. That might sound high, but think about how many Americans have running water and telephone service and electricity going into their home. It's nearly ubiquitous. This is exactly the digital divide that so many researchers have been investigating and talking about for well over a decade. That digital divide continues to exist. But second is that what we investigated that's a little bit different than that typical digital divide is that we also have a geographic digital divide. Metropolitan areas that are wealthy and invest in advanced industries like Seattle and San Diego, they have broadband adoption rates that exceed 85%. Meanwhile, in lower income and less educated marketplaces, especially in the South, like New Orleans and Memphis, have broadband adoption rates below 70%. There's a huge gap in this country, and we need to think about how to get after it, not just by people, but also by region. And third and finally, that adoption gap, that digital divide, we're not making up ground on it fast enough. We need to think about how we can get more students online so they can do homework at home or look at an online course. How job seekers can find every single job that's available to them in the marketplace. How a family can no longer spend too much on their communications and actually afford to see their families on a day-to-day basis all across the country and world. This is the imperative we have moving forward, and that's exactly what our conversation today is going to be all about. There is so much to unpack in here about how we address getting access, adoption rates, and even that skills gap addressed in every community across the country. The panel to follow later this morning is going to talk a little bit more about the solutions going on in their communities and how there are innovative practices that we can follow all across the country. But first, and appropriate to being here in DC, we're going to start with a federal conversation about what the federal government can do to think about expanding broadband access, adoption, and again, address those skills gaps in communities across the country. We are so fortunate to have Senator Booker with us, a senator from the great state of New Jersey. I say that as my mom grew up in Trenton, New Jersey, so I really do mean it. And the senator, both, of course, as the former mayor of Newark, New Jersey, and as well as one of the most active legislators on the Hill when it comes to broadband issues, is especially attuned to be able to talk about that kind of federalist broadband policy framework. That's going to be key for us moving forward. Speaking with him in a very personal way will be Robert Puentes, the senior fellow here at the Brookings Institution and the director of our Metropolitan Infrastructure Initiative. Rob is both the most experienced infrastructure expert at the institution, and he is actually a native New Jerseyan. So I believe that we're going to have no problems having an interesting conversation between the two of them. So, gentlemen, the floor is yours.